The morning sun cast long shadows across the remote training facility in Nevada as Commander Jake Steele Morrison conducted his routine inspection of the sniper range. The 15-year Navy SEAL veteran had seen it all during his distinguished career, from the mountains of Afghanistan to the dense jungles of Southeast Asia. Nothing surprised him anymore, or so he thought. As he approached the advanced marksmanship section, the distinct sound of meticulous weapon maintenance caught his attention. The rhythmic clicking and sliding of metal components being disassembled and cleaned was a familiar symphony to any military professional, but something about this particular session made him pause. Behind a concrete barrier designed to shield shooters from desert winds, a figure worked with surgical precision on what appeared to be a Barrett M82A1 50 caliber rifle. The weapon, known for its devastating long-range capabilities, was laid out in perfect order on a specialized cleaning mat. Each component had been carefully removed and arranged in a pattern that spoke of countless hours of practice and an almost obsessive attention to detail. What caught Morrison's eye wasn't just the methodical approach to the weapon maintenance, but the person performing it. Sergeant Elena "Ghost" Vasquez moved with a fluid grace that seemed almost dance-like as she worked. Her hands, steady as a surgeon's, guided each cleaning rod and solvent-soaked cloth with practiced efficiency. The late morning light caught the determination in her dark eyes as she examined every surface of the rifle's barrel for the slightest imperfection. Morrison had heard whispers about Vasquez during briefings over the past few months. Stories that seemed too extraordinary to be true, tales that even seasoned special operations personnel discussed in hushed tones. But seeing her work with the Barrett, he began to understand why her reputation had spread so quickly through the tight-knit community of elite marksmen. The Barrett M82A1 was not a weapon for amateurs. Weighing nearly 30 pounds when fully loaded, it fired 50 BMG rounds capable of penetrating armor and disabling vehicles at distances that would challenge even the most experienced snipers. Yet Vasquez handled it as if it were an extension of her own body, each movement deliberate and confident. As Morrison watched from a respectful distance, he noticed the small details that separated exceptional operators from merely good ones. The way she checked the rifle's scope mounts for the 100th time, ensuring perfect alignment. How she examined each 50 caliber round individually before loading them into the magazine, looking for any microscopic flaw that might affect trajectory. The careful attention she paid to the weapon's bipod legs, adjusting them with minute precision that most shooters would consider unnecessary. What truly impressed the commander was her complete focus. Despite the activity around the training facility, the distant sounds of other units conducting exercises, and the occasional roar of aircraft overhead, Vasquez remained entirely absorbed in her task. This level of concentration, Morrison knew, was what separated elite performers from everyone else in high-pressure situations. The stories about her had been circulating for months through unofficial channels. Fellow snipers spoke of impossible shots taken in conditions that would challenge any marksman. Intelligence reports mentioned a mysterious figure who had turned the tide in several critical operations across different theaters. But military gossip was notoriously unreliable, and Morrison had learned long ago to trust only verified information. As he continued his observation, Morrison recalled his own early days as a sniper. The countless hours spent learning to read wind patterns, calculating bullet drop over extreme distances, and developing the mental discipline required to make precise shots under combat stress. It had taken him years to master these skills, and even longer to earn the respect of his peers in the special operations community. The Barrett finished, Vasquez began a series of dry-fire exercises that demonstrated her familiarity with the weapon system. She assumed various shooting positions, adjusting her body position and breathing pattern for each scenario. Morrison noticed how she seemed to instinctively compensate for factors that would affect accuracy, even in this practice environment. Her movements suggested thousands of hours of training, the kind of muscle memory that could only be developed through relentless practice and real-world application. The way she shouldered the heavy rifle suggested strength, built through years of carrying equipment across challenging terrain. Her breathing pattern indicated the kind of cardiovascular conditioning that came from operating at high altitudes and in extreme conditions. Morrison found himself genuinely curious about this soldier's background. In a military culture that often struggled with integrating women into combat roles, Vasquez had apparently not only succeeded, but excelled beyond most male counterparts. The fact that she had earned assignment to advanced sniper training spoke volumes about her capabilities and the confidence her superiors had in her abilities. The morning continued with Vasquez running through various equipment checks and preparation routines. She tested her range-finding equipment, calibrated her ballistic computer, and reviewed wind measurement tools with the same meticulous attention she had given the rifle. Every piece of gear received careful inspection and testing, reflecting the understanding that in her profession, equipment failure could mean mission failure or worse. As Morrison prepared to conclude his inspection and move to other areas of the facility, something in Vasquez's posture suggested she was preparing for actual shooting practice. He decided to remain and observe, curious to see how her careful preparation would translate into actual performance. The gap between methodical preparation and execution under pressure was where many promising marksmen failed to meet expectations. The range officer's voice echoed across the facility, announcing that live fire exercises would commence shortly. Morrison positioned himself at the observation point. Knowing that he was about to witness something that would either confirm or dispel the rumors that had been following Sergeant Elena Vasquez throughout the Special Operations community. The Rangemaster's voice crackled through the facility's communication system, announcing the commencement of extreme long-range exercises. Commander Morrison adjusted his position at the observation deck, pulling out his military-grade binoculars to get a clearer view of what was about to unfold. The targets had been positioned at distances that would challenge even the most experienced marksmen in the Special Operations community. Sergeant Vasquez had moved to the primary firing position, her Barrett M82A1 now fully assembled and ready for action. From his elevated vantage point, Morrison could see her settling into her shooting stance, with the kind of natural ease that spoke of countless hours in similar positions. The heavy rifle, which would fatigue most shooters after extended use, seemed perfectly balanced in her hands. The first target stood at 200 meters, a distance that represented the outer limits of effective engagement for most sniper systems. For the Barrett 50 caliber, however, this was well within its operational envelope. Morrison expected to see a competent demonstration of marksmanship, nothing more than what any properly trained military sniper should be capable of achieving under ideal conditions. What he witnessed instead challenged everything he thought he knew about the limits of precision shooting. Vasquez's first shot struck the target dead center with an authority that seemed to silence the entire range. The distinctive boom of the 50 caliber round echoed across the desert landscape, followed by the unmistakable sound of a clean hit on steel. Through his binoculars, Morrison could see that the impact had struck within the highest scoring ring, a demonstration of accuracy that would be impressive even under laboratory conditions. But this was just the beginning. The Rangemaster's voice announced the next phase of the exercise. Targets would now be engaged at progressively longer distances, with environmental factors intentionally challenging the shooter's abilities. Wind flags positioned along the range showed gusting crosswinds that would drift bullets significantly off course if not properly compensated for. The afternoon heat was beginning to create thermal currents that would further complicate trajectory calculations. At 800 meters, Vasquez demonstrated an understanding of advanced ballistics that impressed even Morrison's experienced eye. She spent several minutes reading environmental conditions, consulting her ballistic data, and making minute adjustments to her scope settings, When she finally took the shot, the bullet's time of flight seemed to stretch endlessly before the distant clang of another perfect hit reached the observation area. Morrison found himself leaning forward in genuine anticipation as the range master announced the next target distance, 2,400 meters. At this range, they were approaching the practical limits of the Barrett system under most circumstances. Factors like bullet drop, wind drift, and the Coriolis effect began to compound in ways that made accurate shooting exponentially more difficult. Yet Vasquez seemed to approach this challenge with the same calm confidence she had displayed during her equipment preparation. Morrison watched her take careful wind readings at multiple points along the range, consulting charts and making calculations with practiced efficiency. Her breathing pattern remained controlled and steady, showing none of the tension that might be expected from someone attempting such a demanding shot. When the shot finally came, Morrison's binoculars were focused on the distant target. The bullet's impact created a distinctive flash as it struck metal at high velocity, confirming another direct hit. The small group of range personnel and observers who had gathered to witness the demonstration erupted in subdued but genuine appreciation for what they had just seen. But the exercise was far from over. The rangemaster's next announcement sent a murmur through the assembled observers. The final target had been positioned at 3,200 meters, a distance that pushed beyond the envelope of most conventional sniper engagements. At this range, success would require not just exceptional marksmanship skills, but an intuitive understanding of physics, meteorology, and ballistics that few people possessed. Morrison realized he was holding his breath as he watched Vasquez begin her preparation for this final shot. The process took considerably longer than the previous engagements, involving multiple wind measurements, detailed consultation of ballistic tables, and several adjustments to her scope settings. She seemed to be calculating factors that most shooters would never even consider. The environmental conditions had become even more challenging as the afternoon progressed. Heat shimmer from the desert floor created optical distortions that made target identification difficult, even with high-powered optics. Wind patterns had become more complex, with different velocities and directions at various ranges along the bullet's path. Through his binoculars, Morrison could see Vasquez take several practice breathing cycles, settling into a shooting position that would need to be maintained for an extended period. At extreme ranges, even the slightest movement during the trigger pull could result in a complete miss. The level of muscular control and mental discipline required was extraordinary. When the shot finally broke, Morrison found himself tracking the bullet's theoretical path through his optics, knowing that at this distance, the projectile would take several seconds to reach its target. The desert seemed to hold its breath along with everyone on the firing line. The impact, when it came, was unmistakable. Even at over 3 kilometers distance, the sound of the bullet striking steel carried clearly across the range. Morrison's binoculars confirmed what his ears had already told him. Another direct hit at a distance that would challenge the capabilities of most military sniper teams. As the observers began to disperse and congratulate Vasquez on her performance, Morrison remained at his position, processing what he had just witnessed. The demonstration had been impressive enough to warrant serious attention, but something in the way the range master was consulting his records suggested there was more to the story than exceptional marksmanship. Morrison made his way down to the range level, intending to introduce himself to Sergeant Vasquez and perhaps learn more about her background and training. As he approached, he overheard a conversation between the range master and another instructor that stopped him in his tracks. The words he heard would forever change his perception of what was possible in the realm of military marksmanship and force him to reconsider everything he thought he knew about the limits of human capability under combat conditions. Commander Morrison's approach toward the firing line was interrupted by the range master's voice, speaking in tones reserved for discussions of classified material. The veteran SEAL found himself inadvertently positioned within earshot of a conversation that would reshape his understanding of modern warfare's deadliest practitioners. Check the records again, the range master was saying to his assistant, his voice carrying a mixture of awe and disbelief. Confirm the distance on that engagement in Syria. I want to make sure we have the numbers right before we update her file. Morrison's attention sharpened as the assistant consulted a thick folder marked with security classifications that indicated this was no ordinary training record. The documents contained operational reports from multiple theaters, each bearing the kind of official seals that accompanied accounts of actual combat engagements. Sir, the record shows a confirmed kill at 3,247 meters during Operation Desert Falcon, the assistant reported, his voice barely above a whisper. The target was a high-value individual who had been directing mortar attacks against coalition forces. Weather conditions were reported as challenging, with gusting winds and limited visibility due to sandstorms. Morrison felt his blood run cold as the implications of what he was hearing began to sink in. A 3,247-meter engagement wasn't just exceptional marksmanship. It was a distance that redefined the boundaries of what was considered possible in military sniper operations. The current world record for a confirmed sniper kill stood at just over 3,500 meters, a shot taken by a Canadian Special Forces operator under ideal conditions. But this wasn't about records or recognition. This was about operational effectiveness under combat conditions that would challenge even the most elite military units. Morrison realized he was learning about capabilities that existed at the very edge of human possibility, skills that could alter the strategic balance in critical situations. The rangemaster continued consulting the file, his expression growing more serious with each page. The target was coordinating indirect fire that had already killed 6 coalition personnel and wounded dozens more. Conventional approaches had failed due to the target's position in a fortified compound. Airstrikes were ruled out because of civilian presence in the surrounding area. Morrison found himself drawn deeper into the conversation, despite knowing he was overhearing information that might be classified above his clearance level. The operational context being described represented the kind of impossible tactical situation that special operations units faced regularly, scenarios where conventional military solutions were inadequate or unavailable. The engagement was authorized by Theater Command after all other options had been exhausted, the assistant added, reading from what appeared to be an after-action report. Sergeant Vasquez was inserted into position during a sandstorm that provided concealment but created extreme shooting conditions. Wind speeds were variable and gusting up to 35 knots, with visibility reduced to less than 500 meters at ground level. The tactical picture being described was a nightmare scenario for any sniper. Long-range precision shooting required stable atmospheric conditions and clear visibility to accurately assess environmental factors. Attempting such a shot during a sandstorm would be considered foolhardy by most military professionals, if not completely impossible. Morrison glanced toward where Vasquez was still conducting post-exercise equipment maintenance, her calm demeanor giving no indication of the extraordinary capabilities he was learning about. The contrast between her quiet professionalism and the remarkable nature of her operational record was striking, representing the kind of understated competence that characterized the most elite military operators. The rangemaster closed the file and looked directly at Morrison, apparently realizing that their conversation had been overheard. Rather than showing concern about the security breach, he seemed to recognize Morrison's special operations background and the legitimate operational interest he might have in understanding Vasquez's capabilities. "Commander Morrison," the rangemaster said, extending his hand in greeting. "I believe you've been observing our advanced marksmanship exercises today. What you've witnessed represents capabilities that few people in the military community fully understand or appreciate." Morrison accepted the handshake while processing the implications of what he was learning. In the special operations world, reputation was earned through demonstrated performance under the most challenging conditions. The operational record he was hearing about represented achievements that would establish Vasquez as one of the most capable snipers in military history. The 3,147-meter engagement, Morrison said carefully. That's not just an impressive shot. At that distance, under those conditions, we're talking about capabilities that could change how we approach certain tactical situations. The rangemaster nodded soberly. That engagement eliminated a threat that had been causing significant coalition casualties for over 2 weeks. Multiple attempts by conventional forces had failed to neutralize the target due to his defensive position and the civilian population in the surrounding area. The precision required to make that shot, under those environmental conditions, saved lives and allowed operations in that sector to continue. Morrison realized he was learning about a level of capability that existed at the intersection of exceptional human skill and advanced technology. The Barrett M82A1 was certainly capable of engaging targets at extreme ranges, but the human element, the ability to read environmental conditions, calculate complex ballistic solutions, and execute under pressure, was what made such engagements possible. As he processed this information, Morrison began to understand why Vasquez's reputation had spread through unofficial channels in the special operations community. Capabilities of this magnitude couldn't be hidden indefinitely, especially when they were being employed in operational environments where other elite units could witness their effects. The interesting thing, the rangemaster continued, is that the 3,247-meter shot isn't even her longest confirmed engagement. There are reports from Afghanistan of an even longer shot, but the documentation is still classified at levels above my access. What I can tell you is that her operational record includes engagements that have redefined how theater commanders think about the tactical employment of precision marksmen. Morrison found himself looking at Vasquez with entirely new eyes. The quiet, professional soldier he had observed conducting routine weapons maintenance was apparently one of the most lethal long-range operators in modern military history. Her casual competence during the training exercise now took on entirely different significance, representing not just skill, but operational experience under the most demanding combat conditions. As the conversation concluded and the range began to shut down for the day, Morrison realized he had been given insight into capabilities that represented the cutting edge of modern warfare. The traditional boundaries of battlefield engagement were being redefined by individuals whose skills pushed human performance to its absolute limits. Walking back across the desert training facility as the sun began to set, Morrison reflected on the profound implications of what he had learned. In a world where conflicts were increasingly decided by precision and technology, operators like Elena Vasquez represented a new evolution in military capability, combining human skill with advanced systems to achieve results that would have been considered impossible just a generation earlier. The memory of watching her clean that Barrett .50 caliber rifle would stay with him forever, but now he understood that he had been witnessing the preparation rituals of someone who had redefined the very limits of what was possible in military precision shooting. Her 3,247-meter record wasn't just a number. It was a testament to human capability under the most challenging conditions imaginable.